Hey guys, thanks for clicking on the video. I really appreciate it. Before we get started, I wanted to say thanks to a couple of people who have actually sent me some Christmas gifts. What the heck? I never thought I'd get Christmas gifts from people for doing a YouTube channel, but I really appreciate it. The Bigfoot fairy has come to see me for Christmas. How about that? So I want to thank Muhammad for sending me that cool set of Bigfoot socks. Man, I love them. I actually wore them a couple of days ago, and I'm used to wearing thicker socks, but those were really comfortable. I'm wearing long pants now, so I can't show them off, but maybe this summer I'll put those big green Bigfoot socks on with my Crocs and my really short shorts and walk around and look like Cousin Eddie from Christmas Vacation in Walmart. How about that? I also want to thank Aaron, my buddy Aaron. Aaron took a rock. I'm not sure what kind of rock it is, but he carved, and I don't know how he did it with sandpaper or whatever, but he made this kind of faux Bigfoot bust out of a rock. It's about 5 or 6 inches tall and maybe a couple of inches around. And I've got it sitting here on my desk, and I want to say thanks to Aaron for sending me that. What a nice gift. Both of you people who sent me those gifts are just so nice. Also, my buddy Dennis up in Indiana sent me a couple of items. Thanks, Dennis. You're just awesome. And I got a couple of Christmas cards. Anyway, I can't get this stuff and not say thank you to you guys, even though it's wasting time in the video. Thank you so much. It's really nice. It's not necessary, but it's really nice. All right, now we've got that out of the way. Let's get on with some Bigfoot stories. I am ready to roll. All right, here we go. All right. This first story is not by me. This first story is guest narrated by Nance at Buckeye Bigfoot. I've been talking to her and listening to her channel, and we've been emailing and actually talked a couple of times on the phone, and I'm really taking some pointers from her. She is really good at this, and I love her voice. And if you guys haven't heard of her channel, it's called Buckeye Bigfoot. I'll put a link in the description below. I'll put one of her videos on the end screen at the very end of the video, so there's no excuse for you not going over there and taking a look at what she's doing at her channel at Buckeye Bigfoot. But Nance, thank you for doing this, and I hope you all enjoy this story. It's going to be really good. And then we've got 3 or 4 more after that, so hang with me. Okay, Nance, take it away.
I am not a hunter, camper, or hiker. Unfortunately, my outdoors time is very limited due to my work and having kids. Back in 2010, I was asked to do a photo shoot for a friend. One of my passions is photography, and I was happy to oblige. Since it was a friend, my very pregnant wife and then 6-year-old son were in tow for the adventure. The boy I was photographing also had his dad in tow that day as well. We ended up at a very out-of-the-way lake, specifically Lake Ramona in Fairfield County, Ohio, for some of the shots. We pulled over at a small footbridge that led to a small hill, and upon getting to the top, there was an abnormal silence in the area. None of the typical wood sounds could be heard. The day was unseasonably warm for October. It was around 80 degrees, and we were there around noon, so there should have at least been something moving around. That's when the rocks started being thrown into the water. On the side we came in on, there was a clearing. To the left, where the rocks were coming from, was a lot of foliage. At the time, I had the idea that it might be a Bigfoot, but my skeptical side denied it. There was no way I would be that lucky, and those creatures live far into the interior. You could stand where I was and see the road. Plus, I was working, so I was focused on that. I proceeded to take a few pictures of the boy in front of the lake. He was scared to death. Whatever it was continued to throw rocks into the lake, right behind him nonetheless. We finally called it quits after a few shots. His dad remained on the small hill, looking at something. My wife and young son had gone up a small path. The dad stated that he was seeing eyes across the lake. He pointed them out to me, but I was unable to focus in on them. My concern was for my wife and son, who thankfully returned shortly afterward. We decided to exit since the rocks had continued to be thrown into the lake. That's when it progressed to something hitting a tree. I was done there, but before I left, I took a series of shots. I had no zoom lens, and at that point, I was ready to go, but I thought maybe I'd get lucky and get either a mad hillbilly or something unknown. I was figuring on a hillbilly since I did not smell any of the typical stench that follows a Bigfoot. Fast forward to later that night. I had worked on the images all evening, balancing them out and working on them in Photoshop. I then thought that I'd take a look at the final 7 images I took, and I went from being a skeptic to realizing that I had witnessed a Bigfoot, or as we call them here, Grassman. The creature was jet black, and it took some work in Photoshop to bring out the details. All that was done was a brightness and contrast adjustment. I sat for a while longer comparing what I saw to known primates, and nothing was near to what I was seeing in my images. I then accepted that I got an unknown creature, and it was near midnight when I woke my pregnant wife up. That was far riskier to my health than that Bigfoot earlier in the day, but she too saw something that she could not explain. Since then, I have been interviewed by the BFRO, and my account is on the website. My initial skepticism is gone too, thanks to others who have approached me from my area with their accounts of seeing strange bipeds. I believed these creatures lived in the Pacific Northwest and other areas, but now I know they're far closer than I realized. That little boy that my wife was pregnant with has followed me in my interest in cryptozoology, and I can only hope that my other 2 sons follow suit at some point. Thank you for reading this, Cam. I really appreciate and enjoy your videos. All of what I have said about my account is true. Go ahead and use my name too. Everybody knows I'm a Bigfoot person. Keep up the good work here, Mick.
Okay, here's a Dogman story for all the Dogman fans out there. This is a pretty good one. I think, it was interesting to me, and I think it will be to you. The writer's name is Ethan, and he writes, "My story begins in the small town in Rapides Parish, Louisiana, only about an hour south from the town of Winfield, where the Bigfoot encounter in your Southern Sasquatch video took place. My family has lived in that area since before the Civil War, and although I now live and work on the West Coast, I still visit there every chance I get. It is home to me, and I love it dearly. I grew up in a large house that was built by my grandfather for all of his family to live in. It sits on a large hill, and my family still owns the forests and fields around it for about 100 acres in every direction. It is a very large piece of land, and as soon as I was old enough to walk, I wanted to explore it. I would spend hours romping about in the woods and swimming in the creek, and I would sit on my grandfather's lap as he checked on his cattle and horses, all the while telling me stories of the history of our family and the land that we lived on. When I was 6 years old, everything changed. I saw something that I still remember today, all these years later. If I close my eyes, I can see it as if it happened yesterday, and it definitely changed my life forever. It still haunts my dreams. My grandfather's house has large windows in both front and back, and from its position on the high hill, you can look out into the pastures and see everything that goes on. It was the night of December 20, 1997, and I had just gotten out of school for Christmas vacation. It was cold and very clear, with a waxing moon that hung high in the sky and bathed the world in a silvery glow. The stars are always so bright and clear you could look out the window and see everything in those fields. I had been asleep for a while, but I woke to use the restroom and get a glass of water. I walked down the hall to the kitchen, and as I was standing on tiptoe at the faucet to fill the small glass, I looked out the large bay windows into one of the pastures. What I saw there has stayed with me ever since. The pasture had lots of rich, tall grass for the cows, and they should have been still and sleeping, but they weren't. They were running from something that was charging at them from the other side of the pasture. A large, dark figure with pointed ears raised up out of the grass. The best comparison I could make is that it reminded me of a shark's fin sticking up out of the water, and it looked just as menacing. The cows were panicking, and I could hear them starting to cry out in distress. As I watched with wide eyes, this thing stood up on its hind legs and leaped on one of the calves. It was silhouetted against the moonlight, but I could tell that it was covered in dark hair or fur, and it had a canine-type muzzle filled with teeth. I'm guessing it was 7 feet tall, and there was no tail. The creature moved with such incredible speed that the rest of the herd didn't have time to try to protect the poor calf, which went down and disappeared beneath the creature's bulk. I couldn't see what happened next because the tall grass blocked my view, but even at that young age I knew the calf was already dead. I was so frightened by what I had seen that I didn't scream or cry out. I just ran back to the bed and pulled the covers up over me because I feared the thing might try to get me next. I didn't sleep well the rest of the night, but in the morning my grandfather mentioned that one of his calves had gone missing. I waited until after breakfast when we went out to the porch to sit in his favorite chair because I wanted to talk to him privately. I made him pinky promise not to tell anyone what I was going to tell him, and then I told him everything. I was afraid he wouldn't believe me, but he just sat in his chair and listened without saying a word. When I finished, he got down on one knee so we could be face to face, and he said, "I believe you. You're not the only one to see these creatures. A lot of folks around here have. My father, your great-great-grandfather, had a run-in with one of these things back in 1956, and Mr. Hill from church saw one in 1979. Have you seen one?" I asked. "No," he said, "but I've seen signs of them. I've seen footprints and I've heard them howling. A few times I've found tufts of hair, or at least I think it's their hair, caught on branches or brushes when I was hunting. I don't know how many of them there are or where they came from, but I think they were here long before we were, and they'll be here long after we're gone. Sometimes they come up and take livestock, but not often, but sometimes, especially in the winter. It's best just to leave them alone. If you don't mess with them, they usually won't mess with you. You don't need to be scared of them, but don't be disrespectful either. You're a guest in their home when you go out in the woods. Act accordingly, and you'll be all right." I took my grandfather's advice to heart. I always made sure to treat the land with reverence and respect. I never left so much as a candy wrapper behind me when I went out exploring in the woods, and I never had another sighting or any kind of trouble. I did a lot of research as I got older, and I'm now certain that what I saw was the cryptid creature known as the Dog Man. My grandfather passed away last April, and he took the story of my encounter of the Dog Man to his grave. I still visit the old family home for the holidays, and when I do, I always get the feeling that I'm being watched whenever I step outside. I know that the creature is still out there in those woods with others of its kind, even though we may not see or hear them. I can't help but think that the only reason people have lived in the area for so long is because the creatures allowed us to. It's a very isolated part of the state, and our closest neighbors are a mile or so away. So I'm sure they could frighten us away one by one or even kill us if they wanted to. Perhaps some dogmen may be hostile or even dangerous, but I think the ones in my area just want to be left alone. It's best for everyone if we do just that. Ethan, that's a scary story. A lot of kids see things. We get a lot of stories of adults remembering back to when they were younger. Most of the time they remember things pretty well, but I know my childhood was like a haze. I don't know if it's because I was hyperactive or ADD, whatever they call it now, but energy never left me until I went to sleep. And my mind was always running so fast, but a lot of you guys have great stories that you can remember real vividly. Here's a Dogman story. Now, a lot of people will say Dogman is a bunch of bull. They think it's just kind of a made up thing. But I think it could be just as real as any Bigfoot encounter. And I really kind of like the Dogman stories. I've got two or three kind of major Dogman stories where they actually kill people. And, people go missing and all that stuff. And those are stories I picked up through the years and I've heard, and they're real interesting and they're real scary. One of them, the Men in Black or the Green Berets or the Marine Force Recon went in and killed one. And anyway, I think it's the Dogman of the Hatchie Wildlife Refuge or something like that. That's where they supposedly killed it. But that's pretty scary. Seeing they're kind of like a werewolf from what I understand. They just don't change from human to wolf and then back to human again. They're just always a wolf. But at any rate, I'm just rambling on here, but it's just interesting stuff. So Ethan, thanks for sending that story. It was exciting. Hope you don't have nightmares of it, buddy. All right, let's go to another one. This story I'm about to read you is really not anything more than a typical Bigfoot encounter. It's all abstract and anecdotal type stuff, but sometimes people are able to write so well, they can take even the most benign experiences and make them really exciting. And that's what this guy's done. So I wanted to share this story with you, and I'm just going to jump into it. I promised I would write this story down one day. It is a true recount of my experience with what only could be a Bigfoot in the Smoky Mountain National Park. It all happened because I fell in love, or more likely in lust, with the slim, freckle-faced, little red-haired education major when I was a 20-year-old boy. Looking back on it all now, I wonder what all the fuss was about. Her name is not Karen, but I'm going to refer to her by that name to protect her privacy. Karen was a hiking nut. She spent every minute she could on the Appalachian Trail. A little ways up the mountain from Cades Cove, the trail wanders past some balds, which are pretty mysterious places. Balds are exclusively on tops of ridges where trees will not grow. A Cherokee classmate of mine said one time that the balds are there because Creek and Cherokee medicine men would meet on the top of these ridges and have a spell casting contest. The results were places where nothing but a few blueberry bushes will grow. The Appalachian Trail also wanders past a rock formation called the Sheep's Pen. It is a fairly nice part of the trail with a pretty easy grade. The pen was our destination. It was a 5-mile hike. It was the end of May and warm. It was sunny and beautiful, such as only East Tennessee and God working together can make. We were walking along through a green tunnel. Karen's mane of bright red hair bobbing along in front of me and her slim, round rear end had an almost hypnotic effect on my 20-year-old hormonal-ridden body. We had walked about 2 miles, and gradually I came out of my warm pink fog and realized that something was not quite right. Our feet were mostly silent on the leaf mold-covered trail, but in the woods, especially in the middle of the day, there are all kinds of sounds normally all around hikers. There are the sounds of insects, birds rustling of leaves as squirrels and other things forage. Normal sounds like that are so expected, you don't notice them until they're gone. I had been so engrossed with carnal thoughts, I hadn't noticed they had stopped. I also felt like someone was watching me. I had a distinct prickling going up the back of my neck. Karen was prattling on about something or another. I was paying about as much attention to what she was saying as I would to a jar fly in a tree. This uncomfortable, you don't belong here feeling went on for another mile. I decided I needed to take a leak. Being a man, the whole world is my bathroom. Karen, I said as we took a small candy bar and water break, I think I need to answer the call of nature for a minute. Stay right here. I'm going to step off the trail for a minute and take care of some business. Okay, Karen said, aren't the woods just lovely? And then she started talking and talking again, just like a jar fly in a tree. As I stepped off the trail, I came to the conclusion that nature sure enough compensates. Great rear end, but a little less than par in other ways. I walked about 50 yards off the trail and started to water the base of a large red oak tree. While I was standing there, something odd caught my eye. A few feet from where I was standing, I saw a wild dogwood tree with a trunk that was just a little less big around than my thigh. It had been twisted off at its base. After a few seconds, it hit me. A dogwood is just about one of the toughest little trees that there is. For it to be twisted in two like that would take 4 or 5 men with leather straps or something with huge hands and powerful thumbs. Why would someone do this? No one would ever see it this far off the trail. I muttered all this under my breath. Something is not right here. I got that someone hostile is watching me feeling again. The hair on my arm stood up and I had an overwhelming urge to get the heck out of there. I hurried back to where Karen was waiting. I started to say something, but after looking at those slightly vacant eyes and luscious but constantly moving lips, I thought, what's the point? Sweetie, I think I have a touch of something. We need to get back to the car and go home, I said. Oh, what a shame. This is such a lovely place. Well, if you don't feel good, maybe I should take you home and try to make you feel better. I liked the sound of that, but by this point, my only desire was to get as far from this part of the trail as I could, as fast as I could. It took a long 2 hours to get back to the car. Along the ridge, over our heads, I kept hearing the sounds of leaves rustling. The forest stayed dead silent. No sound of bird or beast or insect could be heard. Whatever it was, it followed us nearly 3 miles back to the car. I was followed one other time some years later, but that may not have been a Bigfoot, and it is another story. Man, it's like you just know, especially if you're used to the woods and you know the sounds of the woods, and you just have to be there to know. It's hard to describe. And I'm not that good at it, but I notice when things are off in the woods, and it could be any number of things. But the point is that people who know the woods, they do a lot of hiking. They spend solitary hours in the woods. They know what it sounds like. They know what's going on. And they almost have this sixth sense that lets you know that there's some other biological creature near. I've had that. I've been sitting in a deer stand before and about to fall asleep, and I'll just get this sense that there's a deer close. There's a deer close, and I'll perk up and I'll wake up, and within 20 or 30 minutes, a little doe will walk out in the field or whatever. And so you just, it's hard to explain how that happens. Anyway, this man, he was having a great time as a 20-year-old with his little redhead beauty. Anyway, it's just a great story. He took a really kind of a, I don't want to say benign as if it's not exciting, but just, a normal story. And he made it really good. And I appreciate the way he wrote it. If you hear this, I hope you like the way I did it. And I really appreciate it. All right, man. Thanks. Okay, once again, I think that's going to do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and if I'm lucky, maybe I'll get another one up this weekend. I've been real busy this week. It's the week after Thanksgiving, and we're going into Christmas, and I got to make some money to buy some Christmas presents, y'all. Come on. All right, I'm glad you all hung with me this long, and we'll see you on the next video. Thank you.